Hi, Professor Tom, or TA, if you're the one grading this. Today I'm going to be presenting the mediator design pattern. So what the mediator pattern attempts to do is to simplify and streamline communications. It reduces direct dependencies between objects, and it enhances reusability and maintainability, as we will see. Okay, so what is the intent? Again, we want to centralize the control so that the mediator handles everything, and that the colleagues, right, the ones that interact um, with the mediator, they only have to interact with that mediator. They don't have to interact with each other. So that solves the problem of complex dependencies, right? Complex dependencies between peer-to-peer objects. Um, and that causes the mess of where if you change one object, you have to change others. It's hard to maintain and scale. This is where the mediator objects come in. All the objects communicate through this one mediator, and this decouples all the logic from the individual objects to the central state. Okay, so a little bit more terminology here. The mediator is the interface for the communication. It defines a contract for the calling. So just as before, where there was a abstract factory, for example, and then a concrete implementation of said factory. In the very same way, there's a mediator and a concrete mediator, which implements a mediator interface. Same thing with the colleague, right? These are the objects that are going to be interacting with the mediator, and very much the same concept. There's going to be a abstract colleague and a concrete colleague. Okay, so the example that I'm going to use to demonstrate this is the chat room example. In this chat room, right, there are many users, but one chat room. The chat room is a concrete mediator, right? There's obviously an interface called mediator, but the chat room class is the one that implements that, and therefore it is the concrete mediator. What it does, as the name implies, is that it manages all the messages. Users don't talk to each other, they make a request, right? They make a send request to, well, they first make a register request to add themselves to the chat room. Then they make a send request specifying their message and who they want to send to, and then the chat room will take care of the rest. Okay, so this is the concrete implementation of the chat room class. I'm going to show you the abstract implementation. That's right here. Well, not abstract implementation, abstract interface. In this case, it's the mediator. It is defining one method signature called send with these three parameters, and then obviously the chat room extends that and implements all the functionality that you see here, right? And yeah, while I'm at it, let me just explain the functionality that's going on here. There's a chat room. It has a register method and a send method. So in my example, we have two users, Alice and Bob. Alice is going to register herself, and what does that do? That basically adds Alice, right, to the user's set here. There's a set in the chat room that maintains all the users. The register method adds the user to this list and also sets the mediator, right? You need to set a mediator on this user object, right? This is a field on the colleague, which is initially null, right? But when they call the register method, this mediator gets populated so that they can actually start interacting with the chat room and start sending messages. Then what they can do is do something, but once both of them get registered, right? It's the same process for registering both users. But I have a third user here just for demonstration purposes, but they're not actually gonna send, they're only gonna be registered. Okay, now that Alice is registered, it's gonna send a message. What are the parameters she sends? She sends a message parameter, and she sends who she's sending it to. What does the send method do inside the colleague class? Well, it takes a message, right, and it calls the chat room send message by passing an additional parameter of the sender, right? You have the receiver, but you also need to know the sender, so that the person on the other end can be notified as to who sent the message, so that it's not anonymous, right? So yeah, it goes and calls the send method up here. If a two-person, right, if a sendee is specified, then it'll be a direct message, and it will call that user's receive method, which is basically just a print statement that says, hey, you received a message from this person to obviously yourself, and here's the message, right? If that's not the case, right, if a receiver is not specified, as you can see here, Bob sends a message without a receiver specified. That means it's a broadcast message. Everyone gets a message, right? Both cases are handled by the chat room, and you can see here, it iterates over all the users in the set, right? All the users that were registered. In this case, 3 users were registered, and for each one, it calls their receive function, printing the message to their console. And that's exactly what you see here. This is the direct message that you saw in the beginning. After Alice registered herself, she just said, hello, Bob. Only Bob sees this. But Bob decided to send a broadcast message, right? He was feeling like greeting the whole group. So he said, hey, everyone, without specifying a sendee. And that just called this else case and sent it to everybody registered in the chat room. So yeah, that's basically it. As you can see, you can add, the benefit of this approach is that you can register as many users as you want, because it's dynamic. The chat room will take care of all the registered users, and all you have to do is send a message, either specifying or not specifying a sendee, and chat room will take care of everything. You never have to touch the colleague class ever, right? You only have to touch the mediator class in case you have more complex functionality that you want to implement in the future. This is the class which would get all of those updates, and not the colleague class. And this, again, once more time, I just want to hone in the point that this reduces coupling and is just excellent for maintainability of large and complex centralized applications. So yeah, I was just going to walk through the user class as well in the slide, but I already did it in the code. Right. I did talk a lot about the advantages, but now I want to mention some disadvantages, because there are some, right? The mediator can become complex, right? The more that you add to it, the more complex it can become. And it also means that there's increased initial development effort to set up such a complex centralized system. But other than that, if you are looking for a centralized solution, this is the way to go. Okay, what are real world applications? We all know how air traffic control works, right? That is one of the first things that comes to mind, or first applications that comes to mind of a mediator pattern, where the airplanes don't communicate with each other, right? That would cause a lot of chaos. What they do is they all report to and receive messages from air traffic control, which is a centralized place. Now, granted, this puts a lot of stress on the air traffic control because it has to coordinate the proper takeoff and landing of numerous flights a day, and probably even numerous flights per hour, depending on how busy the airport is. Um, but honestly, even given all of those cons, it is the best approach for this use case. So that is why you see mediator pattern being used so often in this real world application. Also, UI frameworks. If you've ever developed some complex front end, registration form or sign in form, you will see that good practice is to use something called a form controller, where the UI components like the text fields and the buttons and whatnot, they don't communicate with each other. They communicate with something called a form controller, and that takes care of all the state, the submission, the error handling, the everything, so that the developer is at ease, right? All they have to do really is to define the components, define the layout of the form, and the controller will take care of everything else. So yeah, that has been it. Thank you for listening to my little presentation about mediator pattern. I hope you enjoyed, and have a great day.